Now, here on The Breakfast Show, I've been telling you we're going to be talking about the nonsense that happened on Oxford Street. I've been calling it nonsense because I'm not quite sure what else to make of it. Now, police were deployed yesterday after what they described as a significant amount of officers to the area, after a social media post on TikTok essentially advertised a mass shoplifting event. The Met Police posted a warning with a video of its mounted police saying that we are going to be there. Don't come, don't try to do any illegal activity. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, urged people not to get involved. Police issued a number of dispersal orders, and some of the shops reportedly closed their shutters for a portion of the afternoon in fear that people would come and steal things from the shops and loot things. So what actually did happen yesterday? Things being said on social media and things happening in real life is very different. Gemma Goldfingal was there, and she described the scenes.
We worked about a minute away from Oxford Street, so when we popped down, it was pretty chaotic, to be honest. So I was walking down what is usually quite a quiet off Oxford Street, and probably about 50 to 100 teenagers came running towards me, followed in hot pursuit by a lot of police afterwards. We turned into Oxford Street. I would say probably in eye line was about 10, 15 police vans, and I would say there's probably about 5 to 10 people in handcuffs outside of Oxford Circus tube station. So, it did kick off. It mightn't have been the huge looting that people were worried about, but there were hundreds, if not thousands, of teenagers on Oxford Street.
Okay, so that's what happened. Joining me here in the studio this morning is media and technology lawyer Andrew Eborn. Morning, Andrew.
Good morning, Salma. Lovely to see you in person in the studio.
Lovely to have you here. It's such a rare thrill that we get people in person. Now, Andrew, we've got to start with the legalities of this. What are the legals here? Because if someone posts on social media to say, let's all go and shoplift JD Sports, and then everyone goes and meets up there, surely it feels like evidence.
Well, it's very, very simple. And it's what the joy of this, there's a number of things to unpack, is firstly the power of TikTok, which has been downloaded over 3.5 billion times. It's in excess of 1.5 billion active monthly users. And they call it the crack cocaine of algorithms because the engagement and so on and so forth that you can do. So the question is about liability all the way through and also about the police powers. And I was down on Oxford Street around sort of 7 o'clock and I spoke to some of the officers and witnessed various things to myself. I also saw the various clips on Twitter with people running through the streets and so on and so forth. What I can say is that the officers themselves were very pleased to have the powers that they have under Section 35 of what's called the Antisocial Behaviour, Crime and Policing Act of 2014. Which basically gives them the power of dispersal. And what they can do is where there are members of the public and locality being harassed, alarmed or distressed, or there's an occurrence of a crime likely to happen, they can do this basically order telling people to disperse. And there are a number of those dispersal orders. I saw on your reports, brilliant reports today, there were about 24 of these dispersal orders issued. And what that meant is prevention is better than cure. So you can get people out of the area, which is why there were so few arrests in comparison. But basically, if you don't comply with the dispersal order and you come back to the area, then you're guilty of an offence and you can be imprisoned for up to 3 months or get a fine of £2,500. And so looking at that sort of side, that was a very helpful power for the police, and that's what every officer said to me.
What about the person who posted that video that said, let's all go and loot JD Sports, essentially? Because where's the criminality or where do the legalities lie in that? Because it made me think a bit of Minority Report. A crime hasn't happened yet.
Yes.
And can you stop a crime happening before a crime happens? But if you do, can you then charge that person for a crime that they didn't do but they were going to do, but we don't know if because they couldn't. They might have stopped doing it.
That was easy for you to say, wasn't it?
I've got kind of Minority Report flowing around in my brain because it's a bit like that.
It is totally like that. And there's two aspects to it. Is one, the original poster and what sort of liability they might have, and also the social media platform. And there's big discussions about that. So the first thing is under the what's called the Serious Crimes Act of 2007, Section 44 says that if you intentionally encourage or assist an offence, then you are guilty of that offence. And the maximum penalty is that sort of side. Encouraging it. So what I would urge people, the Londoners are brilliant, and most Londoners are very, very sensible. I think we should look at what the real cause of these sort of issues are, because you see it around the world. And people see these images on social media, people looting in various places around the world, and it becomes sort of inspirational, if you like. And I think a lot of disaffected youths and so on and so forth, they're looking for an excuse to get together and maybe do that sort of stuff.
I mean, that's such a good point, because yesterday, people were turning up at Oxford Circus, on Oxford Street, to watch and to film what was happening. They weren't turning up to partake in it, but they wanted to film something that could go viral based on something that had gone viral.
Yeah.
It was almost like social media eating itself.
That's exactly the phrase I was going to say. It was social media eating itself, because what happens is TikTok, the crack cocaine of social media, if you like, you want to be liked. And in an area, in a sort of an era where we basically no longer have connections in the real ways, what I always say is that the more means of communication we have, the more technology, the less we're able to communicate. And I think the real interesting side is the underlying cause of that. We need people to have a purpose in life. If you don't have a purpose, you look for these groups where you get these likes which are meaningless on social media.
Is the problem that lots of people's purpose now is likes and followers, and I don't want to sound like a 90-year-old person who's never grown up with tech and who hates tech, which is also damning because there's lots of 90-year-olds who love
Silver
tech.
Surfers are brilliant. Big shout out to them.
Absolutely. So I'll just speak for myself here.
Yes.
And I'm not on TikTok. I have an account. I've briefly looked at things. I don't post anything. I look on there for book talk is what I go on TikTok for. I find TikTok quite difficult to get my head around. I use Instagram, I use Twitter, I'm engaged with it, I'm all there with it. There is something about TikTok, though, that lends itself, in my view, to a real stupidity. And I worry that there is a great brain drain happening, because what else do we call it when you have people going, oh yeah, this person said, let's go loot JD Sports, let's get at it. And I don't know if this is right, but I would say that there are lots of people who might have partook in that who would never have had the thought to do anything criminal.
Oh, no,
previously.
absolutely. And what they need to, and this is why it's so important to emphasise the penalties that are involved, because basically you could ruin your life if you take part in these things. Because what happens, obviously under the Theft Act, if you're convicted of theft, you get up to 7 years custody. Criminal Damage Act, you can get up to 10 years in prison. So what happens is, you're absolutely right. P.T. Barnum, the great showman, always used to say, if you want to draw a crowd, start a fight. Well, people do that. And what's happening on social media, that's exactly what happens. The interesting thing, Salma, as well, though, is what's going to happen in terms of liability for these social media platforms. So TikTok themselves, in their terms and conditions, they say that they're not liable for any content posted by its users. And there's a couple of things there about the criminality. There's the whole thing about copyright. As you know, I'm an intellectual property lawyer, so deal with that sort of side. There's defamation that people say, and so on and so forth. And what happens is, at the moment, we've got basically the law going through at the moment, the online safety bill, which is basically trying to say that platforms have to take more responsibility to remove all illegal content, and also remove content that is in breach of its own terms and conditions. And the penalty is still going through Parliament very, very slowly, like treacle going through at the moment. But basically the penalty, if they don't comply, is fines of up to £18 million, or, what's even far worse for these big companies, 10% of the company's global turnover.
Wow.
Now
that would be
the penalties would be massive. The difficulty, Salma, is this. It's about enforcement.
Yeah,
because
who do the penalties
have
go
to.
to?
Well, and also you've got to turn around and say, well, how are they going to enforce it? Because people are posting zillions of posts all the time.
Of course. How do you monitor
Enforcement costs money.
Yes, it does.
And I always say that if a service is free, then you are the product. So at the moment, we're giving away all this data and so on and so forth that people should be absolutely very, very scared about. But also looking about the implications about social media. So a lot of people, Elon Musk and the Musketeers and Mark Zuckerberg, they're all looking about end-to-end encryption. Now, the thing about end-to-end encryption is that they then can't see the content. And if you can't see the content, they would say that we can't monitor it for you, and so on and so forth.
Well, listen, this is a conversation that's going to go on, and I think we will be speaking again. Andrew Eborn, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
It's a pleasure to see you.